That's Peterson's point, and he didn't make it particularly well, or didn't make it as well as he could have. But that's the issue. Dillahunty did not win at the end of that exchange. He basically admitted Peterson's point. To be honest with you,
whether we know it or not. So, for example, so far as I can tell,
then why do you need free will?
I don't think.
Why do you believe in
will.
it then? Why do you attribute agency to things if the laws of the universe can
get to that one point?
Well, yeah, but there was a contradiction that was confusing me.
Free will isn't relevant to this.
It is if the laws of the universe are what are dictating what's good for us.
No, because if you chop off my head, that is clearly not good for me.
So much is shoved into the word clearly. It's not clear at all to you because I don't know what your fundamental assumptions are. Your fundamental assumptions for well-being, if you chop off my head, it is clearly contradictory to my physical well-being as an organism, if you define it by my evolutionary goals to survive. But it's not clear that that criteria is morally good, because morality is something that's not physical. It's something that is separate. It's just the Izzat problem. So, everybody laughs because, oh, look at this obvious example. It's so obvious to us. Well, yeah, it's obvious to you, but it's not obvious to you because you read it in a physics textbook or even because you read it in an evolutionary biology textbook. It's obvious to you because you are a human being who knows that you personally don't want your head to be chopped off. And you don't know that, and you know that, but you don't know that that instinct is good as an objective fact. You know that that instinct is good and true and moral because it's been inculcated into you by your culture and because it's closely connected to evolutionary biology. But the idea that having your head chopped off is not in your best interest, you cannot get that from only the physical. It's the Izzat problem. Beating the dead horse to death. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to make it die twice because we're running over this really quickly. As far as Peterson being defeated, honestly, I'm kind of annoyed that he hasn't really brought this up yet. I think that Dillahunty has given him a few openings to cut right to the heart of the matter, and Peterson has kind of touched it, but he's also really kind of dancing around it and not going after it particularly hard. That should be what he's railing against. That should be his number one target of attack. So let's see if he shapes up here.
And it doesn't matter whether it was an act of free will or if it was lawnmower.
It's clearly not good for you because you think you're valuable and worth preserving.
Yes.
Okay, that's the issue. Why do you think you're valuable and worth preserving?
Correct.
Because I am the descendants of people who thought they were valuable and worth preserving, and the ones who didn't think that have killed themselves. But this is not a statement.
Right, but that doesn't make it good.
About this is.
Yeah, Peterson's laughing because he knows he's avoiding the issue. It's like, yes, correct. We understand where the evolutionary drive to live comes from. You still have not explained to me why I should regard this particular evolutionary drive as morally good. Because I have evolutionary drives and you have evolutionary drives to do a whole bunch of stuff that would not be moral at all. I could list many among them, including aggression and violence, particularly sexual violence, all of these things, evil stuff. But evolutionary biology gives you an instinct and a desire to go for it. And many of your ancestors had to engage in this behavior in order to survive. That's why it's a biological or evolutionary instinct in many people. So this argument is completely... it's completely paper thin. Just because you have an evolutionary instinct for something doesn't make it automatically good. It's some evidence that it might be good, but it's not moral goodness of in itself. It's not enough. And Peterson is laughing because Dillahunty doesn't seem to be getting it. Or he's intentionally ignoring it, one of the two. Or Peterson is just too bad at, is just not really being direct enough for him to understand Peterson's point, which is also possible. But either way, I'm laughing right along with him here.
It's not a statement of descendants of people who thought they were valuable and worth preserving, and the ones who didn't think that have killed themselves. But this is not a statement as irrespective. This is not a statement about intrinsic value.
I don't know. Yes, I think
No,
it is.
it's-
Okay, but I think it is.
Okay.
So Peterson's like kind of wrong here because, as we just discussed, evolutionary instincts and the acknowledgement of them as existing is not inherently something that speaks to intrinsic morality. But Dillahunty's implication in his argument is that this instinct serves as proper basis for the idea of best interest, which is a moral claim, and so therefore by transitive property, because Peterson is linking these two together, as Dillahunty is linking these two together, but he's not really acknowledging that. Peterson sees these two things as linked and is laughing about it. So just clearing up that exchange for you guys there. And Peterson's right, they are linked.
The reason that we talk about this in terms of well-being is because irrespective of whether or not I care about well-being, there are facts about well-being.
Sure, let's hear them, man. Line those suckers up.
If you chop off my head, it's in contradiction to my well-being. I mean, but the point.
No, I wasn't willing to grant that, actually.
Okay.
I'm saying that's a metaphysical presupposition. You're just saying I have to accept that.
No, I'm not telling you at all what to accept.
Sure you are. You're saying that your death would be wrong.
I'm trying to explain what my position is.
Okay, but you said that wouldn't be in accordance with your well-being. Okay, that's a metaphysical statement.
Well, it wouldn't be in accordance with your biological well-being because your body is going to continue to survive. But the thing that many people who hold the well-being standard like to do is they talk about the facts of well-being as a biological thing, and then they kind of smuggle in the fact that it's also like the well-being is also like a moral basis, not just like a biological description. So like if something's bad for you biologically, it's also therefore bad for you morally. Like they won't say that because as Dillahunty's talking, he's talking about the facts. But then when they use the idea of well-being in an argument, the idea of well-being as a moral foundation gets smuggled in. It's actually Peterson gets accused of Jesus smuggling. It's actually kind of a similar thing. It's like morality smuggling. It's what they like to do. It's like they talk about how it's all very, very rational, very objectively descriptive, but then they use it beyond that capacity because after they defend it and everybody accepts it, once they start using it in an argument, what they tend to do is they tend to use it as a moral standard as well, and that's what Peterson is getting at.
A philosophical statement. It's not an obvious fact.
That
That's
chopping
not a
off somebody's
fact.
head is contrary to their well-being.
Depends on how you define well-being.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it matters.
Right. If you defend it as just so this is the point, right? If you defend it as just biological success or evolutionary success, sure. But again, like I said, they tend to use it as they defend it as that description, and then they use it as a moral proposition. And Peterson is pointing that out, although not particularly explicitly. This conversation's a little bit vague for my taste.
If you define well-being as this glass of water, we're no longer talking about the same thing.
Well, you can define well-being. That's fine. That's what I'm waiting for.
This is what I'm. Well,
You can't do it. You can't define well-being. It's
well, then
very,
why
very
should I try? I
difficult.
certainly can't do it if you keep telling me I can't do it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I'll back off. There's a. Go ahead. I'm all ears.
So, the primary objection to mine and Sam's position that keeps coming back is why should anybody care about well-being? And we both will acknowledge that this is, in fact, a subjective preference. There are people who are going to care about well-being. There are people who aren't. The second objection is that well-being is not clearly.
Well, first of all, that's actually a problem because if your entire foundation of morality is subjective and you acknowledge that it's subjective, then it means that you can make no moral judgments of anybody, right? So if I believe in well-being and you don't, but I agree that my foundation is subjective, I have no legitimacy. I have no metaphysical foundation from which to attack you or your morality because it's just subjective. You don't share my foundation and I just kind of have to shrug. I can say, oh, I personally think that's very bad, but that's a matter of opinion, just like, oh, I think mac and cheese is better than broccoli, right? It's really, because it's so subjective, it's just that. But if you believe in a morality that's not purely subjective, then you actually have the metaphysical standing to say, no, what you're doing is wrong, and it's not just a matter of opinion like sports teams are a matter of opinion, but it's actually wrong. Like, killing that baby is not just a matter of opinion. That's actually bad. And I actually have the right to say that, and it is true in more than just a Patriots are better than Jets type of way. Although objectively speaking, for most of the time, the Patriots were better than the Jets in terms of performance. We're talking about, better as in more favorite, but whatever.
Defined. Both of us have acknowledged this. It's not as if we're saying we have all the answers to how to go about living a better life. We're just saying that however we're going to define well-being, which is, I say you can start with a couple of foundations. You could start with death is preferable to life, but you don't get very far that way. And
Stop suffering.
Well, no, I'm saying you could start with death is preferable to life, but you don't get very far that way because those
you do. You stop suffering. You just die.
Yes.
Right. So you can start with the presupposition.
I mean, I know Dillahunty said that well-being isn't supposed to be pure consequentialism and isn't supposed to be pure utilitarianism, but I gotta tell you, it really does sound like it. So what Peterson is saying here is, I mean, he won't let Dillahunty get through the definition, but let's say it's safe to assume a big part of the definition of well-being is, minimizing unnecessary suffering and maximizing, let's say, pleasure or contentment. If you assume that suffering outweighs contentment for almost all human beings, and it does because that's how your brain is wired to be constantly seeking, if you die, then that will stop all of your suffering. And you can make a strong argument that that would be a maximization of well-being if you define well-being, like I said, as maximizing contentment and minimizing suffering. Now, Dillahunty hasn't gotten that far. Peterson is jumping ahead, and so it's a kind of one more of these types of silent, semi-awkward, semi-funny standoffs because he's jumping ahead in the argument. But that's a real argument. It's why I think that utilitarians and people who believe in this sort of stuff really should probably be anti-natalists if they want to be consistent.
Except that when you're dead, you're not being, so there's no well-being.
No, well,
That's actually, let's let Peterson respond first.
That's not necessarily the
if
case.
If we're looking for the best things.
Okay, well, Dillahunty just cut him off, so let me respond. Well, actually,
about our life, you can't say death is better.
He didn't say best things about your life. He said best things about well-being. But this is the problem. Because now there is no fact about being alive or of being that makes it better than death. He says that if you want to maximize well-being, death doesn't get you very far. Okay, fair enough, but again, why is being or life inherently better than death? Because you can't make the suffering argument. So again, all Dillahunty is revealing is that he does have a priori assumptions. That's all he's revealing here. Like, I know it looks bad for Peterson, and it kind of does because I don't think Peterson conducted himself well rhetorically in this debate. Well, not as well as he could have, ideally. I'm not going to say that I could do a better job. I probably couldn't. But he did not conduct himself in the ideal way, let's say. And that makes it look like Dillahunty has a better point than he does, because all he's really just admitting to you there is that he thinks that being is inherently valuable. That's literally what he's saying. Because if well-being is the foundation for all of your moral calculations, and we're talking about defining well-being, and one of the premises we start with is that you have to stay alive, what's your justification for that exactly? It can't be well-being because this is part of your description of well-being. It's free-floating. If you have well-being up here and it's your foundation for everything, and now you're trying to define well-being, if one of your tenets is living and not dying, that's an a priori assumption. It floats on nothing. It's based on faith. Which is exactly Peterson's point, that he is making a priori assumptions based on faith about intrinsic value. He is assuming that life and being is preferable to death. He's just assuming that. And to Peterson, that's basically acting like there's a God. That's basically acting like human beings have some inherent value. That's Peterson's point. And he didn't make it particularly well, or didn't make it as well as he could have, but that's the issue. Dillahunty did not win at the end of that exchange. He basically admitted Peterson's point.